I've heard so many stories from the deep web, and honestly, I can say it's not exactly something you want to be on. Sure, it's neat to check out some of the less scary things, but sometimes curiosity can get the better of you. I'll go ahead and describe something I experienced about 3 years ago. At the time, I was still in high school. I recall my friends talking about some really weird stuff they had seen online. I ended up wanting to know what they had been talking about, and they mentioned something called the deep web. Of course, I wasn't sure what they meant, so they showed me some videos about it. Safe to say it piqued my interest, not for the terrible things, but just the overall mystery behind it. But how to go on it was a question that I kept wanting the answer for. There were various programs you could get, but was it really safe? The next couple of days I spent time doing some research. That's when I finally got the courage to get Tor. Now, with my keys to the deep web kingdom, the exploring began. It was pretty mild at first, just documents and various other pointless information. Then there were pages for things like weapons and hitmen. I didn't bother with any of those things because it seemed pretty sketchy. After about 30 minutes of exploring, I stumbled onto a video sharing website. It was like YouTube, but most of the videos were of low quality. Some of them were just still creepy images with scary music, and others looked to be like homemade tapes. I clicked on a few videos, and apart from a few jump scares, I decided I had enough. However, before leaving, I did notice there looked to be an online chat room. Curious, I went ahead and checked it out. There were a total of around 15 people, and each were talking about different videos they had seen. Since I saw anyone could comment and make a random username, I went ahead and commented on some videos I'd watched. I kid you not, the whole chat went silent, and I was left confused. Don't tell me they haven't seen a normal comment just say hello, I thought. After about 20 seconds of no responses, someone finally sends a message out.
Hello to you back too. I see we have a new victim to play with.
I figured whoever commented that was joking around, so I went ahead and played along. Big mistake.
Ha ha. Yeah, I guess I am, aren't I? What are you gonna do about it? Come to my house and take me away? Oh, we're gonna do that all right. Just you wait. We know you've been watching videos this past hour.
I was confused by what this person meant. As it turned out, there was a little counter on the bottom of the page I hadn't really paid attention to. It'll show how many people are on the website at any given time. I'm guessing the number had stayed the same before I went to the site. Oh, and I guess I forgot to mention something else of importance. I guess it's not exactly smart to have normal pages and applications open when you're exploring this part of the web. I'll go ahead and tell you why in a bit. Anyways, I got genuinely creeped out, and I logged off immediately. This, however, isn't the end to my experience, at least not yet. Fast forward to the next day at school, and I had told my friends about what I had done. They thought I was lying, but I told them they could come over to my house to check it out for themselves. Therefore, that afternoon we went to my house to go and log on yet again. My parents were confused as to why all my friends were over, but I told them we were working on a school project. So once we were successfully online, I showed them some of the places I looked up. They then typed in their own suggestions, and we found some pretty nasty things. Since I had all my friends with me, I now had the courage to take them back to the website I had been on. Going onto the site, I noticed I missed a message. I guess making a username automatically makes you an official member. I ended up clicking on the little notification symbol, and it appears to be like the same person who messaged back the other day. The message more or less says,
Did you really think signing off was going to hide you from me? Don't tell me you thought I couldn't tell you were being sarcastic. Also, thanks for leaving your Skype open and your webcam on. I can't wait to find you.
If that wasn't creepy enough, there appeared to be an image I could download. I was scared to open it, but my friend suggested I do it anyways. Against any logic, we went ahead and clicked on it. No joke, there is a screenshot of the conversation I had, and you could even see my Skype was open. I have no idea how he did it, but somehow, he had gotten a picture. My friends thought I was making this up to scare them, but one look at my face said otherwise. Best course of action now was to completely remove the program and do a hard resetting of the entire computer. That's what I ended up doing, and I thought all of my worries were behind me. However, fast forward roughly 6 months later, and I started to notice strange activity. I'm not sure if it was a coincidence, but one night this minivan, with its windows tinted out, started to follow me home. It did give me the creeps, but by this point I'd already forgotten about what happened earlier in the year. Over the next couple of nights, I would notice that same van parked across the street. It got so bad, I ended up calling police, explaining my situation. I never mentioned the deep web part. I just told them about the van. Since it hadn't done anything wrong, they told me there wasn't really much they were able to do. They did, however, tell me they would keep a lookout for it. Even so, there was one final thing that happened. Our family was getting ready to move away, as my dad had found a better job. I myself was going to be studying abroad, and I was going to be leaving soon. One morning, I had gotten up early to go for a run. On my porch, however, was a box that simply had my name on it. It was small, but I thought perhaps a friend had left it. Inside, I will never forget what I found. There was a picture of my house, along with pictures of me taken from a distance. Whether it be at home or at the park, they surely creeped me out. If that wasn't enough, there was a letter. It simply said,
See? I told you I'd find out where you lived. But why did you have to call the cops? You ruined our fun. You're lucky. I'm feeling nice today, so I'm going to let you go. But don't ever mess around with me, or our chat room, ever again.
You bet I accepted that warning without giving it another question. I did, however, now show all of this to the police, but ultimately nothing came up. I no longer had any of the logs on my computer, as I had to reset it. Also, I'm not sure how he found out where I lived. One thing is for sure, however, I know I'm never using the deep web ever again. My friend from the deep web. I could really use your advice with this one. I gained nothing from making this up, and I'm honestly still scared. Please understand that due to my retelling of this, I'm going to have to keep myself and my location anonymous. Now let me begin. Some time ago, I ended up moving out from home and attending community college. I'm female, by the way, and I was 19. Anyways, my parents ended up helping me get a small apartment. Luckily, I was able to help pay it off with a job where I worked at a nearby Ralph's. My first spring semester there was pretty uneventful, and I would spend most of my free time going on the now non-existent Club Penguin. Silly, I know, but there is a point to all of this. Just give me a moment. Over time, I started getting to know the different users, and I really connected with one person in particular. It's been almost 3 years, and I already forgot the username, but it was something like Diamonds Are Unbreakable. And yes, I did just make a JoJo reference. Okay, I digress. The point is, we ended up adding each other on Instagram after talking for almost 2 months. He didn't have any pictures of himself. It was just anime artwork and various other Club Penguin pictures. I myself had a normal profile, with pictures of myself, family, etc. Also, this was during a time when my profile was set to public, something I later changed. So anyways, this is how we interacted for the next month or two. We started talking about random things, until one day he mentions the deep web. Now, up to that point, I had seen a few videos about it, but I thought most of it was pretty fabricated. The story sounded just like that. Stories. Something people told each other, but never really proved. He goes to tell me that he had been on the dark web a couple of days ago, and he saw some pretty scary things. He even goes ahead and sends me some pictures of what he found. It definitely creeped me out, and I started to become interested. Not in the pictures, but checking out the deep web. I wanted to see what the big deal was, and to prove there was nothing to these stories I had heard. Of course, I wanted to make sure I did it as safely as possible, so he ends up sending me directions and basic programs I could get so I could start. It took a while, but over a Skype session, we were able to get it installed. The thing is, I didn't want anything too crazy, so I told him,
"Okay, just don't send me some creepy links that could get me into trouble. Give me some good recommendations."
He sent me a couple of websites which I eagerly clicked on. The first one was a website that contained a bunch of old medical documents. Some of them even showed some pretty eerie grayscale Polaroids. The next one appeared to be sort of like a social media website. Think of Facebook. There were forums, the option of making profiles, and even pages you could follow too. I actually went ahead and I made my own profile. Of course, I used a different name, but I made the dumb decision of using one of my own photos. I guess that's what I got for being so into myself. Mind you, it was a really old picture from like 5 years ago. Moments after uploading the picture, it clicked in me that I was on the deep web. I shouldn't have put my own photo. Realizing my mistake, I changed it to the default image about 20 minutes later, but sadly it was already too late. I soon forgot about the website, however, and I logged off. Fast forward 3 days later, and my friend told me he was going to be moving to a different home and might not respond for the next week or so. I was fine with this as I was busy with midterms and work myself. Fast forward another 2 days, and my curiosity was starting to pick at me again. I remembered that social media site I'd made an account on. I went onto it, and I noticed I had a follow request. The person's name was simply Billy. This was funny. I forgot to mention it, but my Club Penguin friend's name was also Billy. I guess he might have added me on here. I mean, he was the one that sent me the link, and I did tell him I made a profile. I accepted him, thinking, whatever, it's not like some random person is going to add me. Almost immediately, however, I got a message from Billy.
"Hey there, thanks for adding me. It's always great to have friends on here. By the way, you're really pretty in your profile picture."
This confused me. I thought I changed the profile picture, but it turned out just because you removed the profile picture itself didn't mean it was removed from the photo album. Sure enough, that selfie of me was still there. I went into panic mode as I looked for a way to delete it. Billy reassured me it wasn't a big deal, and I started to relax.
"Okay, Billy, so I guess since we're friends on here, we can secretly message each other without anybody finding out what we're sharing, can't we?"
Billy, and I say that in quotations, responded with a simple,
"Yeah, you're right. There are so many things I want to show you."
Billy then proceeds to send me a link that was supposed to be an online game.
"Want to play together? It's kind of like Minecraft. You can build your own things with blocks. I promise, it's fun."
I decided, why not? So I clicked on it. This was a dumb decision on my part, because my computer crashed almost immediately. Great. Sadly, the computer wasn't working properly. My best guess was the link I clicked on was responsible. Over my phone, I ended up messaging Billy on Instagram, angry that he owed me a brand new computer.
"Wow, Billy, really? You know, you owe me a new computer. It's your fault it crashed."
About 20 minutes later, he responds with confusion. The conversation goes like this.
"What are you talking about, Lexi? I never did anything to your computer." "Oh yeah? Then explain the so-called game you wanted me to play." "Okay, hold on, wait a minute. I'm lost. What exactly are you talking about? The link you sent me on the deep web? I mean, your profile's name is Billy, right? I never made a profile on there. What are you talking about? I just sent it because you requested I send you something super scary. Besides, I've been so busy with the move. I already told you that, remember?"
Needless to say, the so-called Billy person who sent me a request wasn't my buddy I'd been talking to. It just so happened that somebody with the same name happened to send me a request, and I was under the wrong assumption. That's when the panic started to set in yet again. The person most likely took a screenshot of my photo and most likely will find me too. As an update, about a month later, I received a creepy message on my Instagram. I still remember the username, and it gives me the chills. It was, "Billy is still here." The message had a picture sent, as well as a caption with, "I found you." I opened the picture, and sure enough, it was the one I had uploaded. Immediately I blocked him and deleted all of my social media. And in case you're wondering, I have tried looking up his Instagram page, but he ended up removing it. What do you guys think I should do? Any and all help is greatly appreciated. Creepy dealers. What do a couple of curious college students decide to do on their weekend off? Oh, that's right. Go on the deep web and see if it's actually possible to get one of those mystery boxes people always talk about. That's what my buddy and I did one day in 2017. Unfortunately, we were, and still in a way are full of ourselves, and we think we're those tough shots who aren't scared of anything. Boy, we would be so humbled that I don't even wish this upon my worst enemy. To make a long story short, my friend and I actually ordered a mystery box off this really sketchy website that allowed multiple forms of delivery. You could either have the package dropped off at a P.O. box, your actual address, which as you might know is a dumb idea, and then the third, delivery in person. Now maybe we can scratch the delivery to your home address as dumb. Delivery in person, worst idea ever. But remember, we're these tough and dumb guys who aren't afraid of anything. Anyways, I kept in contact with the seller via email of all things, apparently thinking I could trust them, and I give them a general location of the city I'm located in. We are told a couple of their associates would deliver the package, but there was a catch. The delivery would have to be made early in the morning to avoid any sort of unwanted attention. Also, I was told to sign a disclosure that if I even attempted reporting them to the police, they would have no problem going after my family, which again is already a huge alarm bell. Last but not least, it would have to be at a location they chose. Now, if this already sounds like a recipe for all things to go wrong, you would not be wrong in that assumption. The seller followed up with another email, and he stated it was okay not to accept these demands, and the money would be refunded to me. I was given 48 hours to respond, but like you might have guessed, we went through with the purchase. Fast forward to the evening of the deal. We drive an hour out of the city to this ghost town out in the desert. Both my buddy and I sat in the car, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the delivery driver. I should note that both of us were armed with knives and mace, just in case things went south. Finally, after waiting almost 25 minutes, a van pulls up in front of my truck. No kidding, 5 men armed with ARs jump out of the back seat, and they begin to approach our vehicle. One thing was obvious. We hadn't signed up for anything like this. We floored it out of there, never looking back. Fast forward about an hour later, I got an email from the seller asking why we drove away from the delivery. Both my friend and I were astonished as we didn't realize that was part of the deal. The seller tells me that if we didn't pay a penalty fee for wasting their time, there would be serious trouble for the both of us. Considering the fact they went to such crazy means to make the delivery, we don't question them any further. Unfortunately, they got my friend and I for an extra $1,000 in fees, but it was worth it to ensure we were safe. Which update? We have never gone on the deep web again, nor have we had any contact with that seller. Hey everyone, just a quick message here before we begin. For those of you who are fans of my animation series, I just launched a brand new YouTube channel for my character Jamie. Very soon, we're going to start releasing music covers that are sung by her. The first two songs, All I Want for Christmas by Mariah. Don't people say school is supposed to be just as safe as your home? A location where you not only learn, but create everlasting memories? Oh boy, everlasting memories were created, and one in particular stands out from the rest. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but just think of the context of not knowing what might happen next. I forget exactly which year it was, but I want to say it was either junior or senior year of high school. From my memory, I recall we were watching a movie in one of my science classes when we were suddenly interrupted by a student who entered the classroom. He was out of breath, and everybody just looked at him funny. Finally, he just decided to point out the window, and the teacher goes to see what had caused the scare. She lets out a gasp, and then grabs the room key and locks the door. Some students, including myself, start to look out the window, and that's when we see it. There was a man trying to open some doors, and he's got a hold of what looks to be like a machete. This was confirmed when the student who had run into her room says that they were just walking out of the restroom when they heard somebody mumbling. They then see the man with the machete who looked as if he was drunk. That leads us to these moments. Well, it turned out some other students and teachers had spotted him, because when we see our teacher reach for the phone, the school's alarm system starts to ring. That ring, wow, let me tell you, you can't forget it. It might seem basic, but when you know the meaning behind it, which we were taught was to be used only during a lockdown, it gave you nightmares. Anyway, all the students are freaking out, naturally, and all our teacher could do is remind us to remain quiet and wait for the all clear to be given. It felt like an eternity, and it was made worse when we could hear somebody try to open the door. It was the man. How did we know? We could see him through the cracks of the blinds. He tried kicking at the door shortly after, but we see him walk off less than 15 seconds later, heading toward the high school's baseball field, which happened to be in our line of view. Anyway, 5 minutes later we saw at least 20 police officers, some in SWAT gear, head toward the baseball field. Then 15 minutes later, a couple of police officers reach our classroom and tells us it's safe to head outside. The school day was cancelled, and I met up with my parents who, like you might have imagined, were worried sick. Luckily, if there was one positive to the experience, they treated me to some Baskin-Robbins ice cream. Now, the part of the story where the man was caught was later relayed to us the following day, but here's what happened. The man who walked onto our campus was indeed drunk. His companion in his misadventures, that machete. Police officers found him trying to break into a shed where the PE teachers kept all the sporting goods. Apparently, the man didn't give a fight, which made things much more smooth. So there you have it, my high school lockdown story. This happened a long time ago, as in the early 1990s. I was a junior in high school, which meant I would be allowed to walk off campus for lunch. This was allowed only for juniors and seniors, and it's something my friends and I took huge advantage of. Normally, we were only given 30 minutes for our lunch, but we would always give some sort of excuse saying we got stuck at a red light or the food was taking too long. Hey, the teachers believed it, so why not? Now, the nice thing was our high school was just a 5-minute walk away from a junior college, which, side note, I actually attended that college 2 years later. Anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because myself and some friends would go there to the cafeteria, as their food was way better than the one they served at our high school. For example, the junior college had a Taco Bell, Round Table Pizza, and a Carl's Jr. On top of the recognized fast food chains, there was a small arcade in the basement that featured Street Fighter, Pac-Man, and there was even a bowling alley. Cool, right? Sure, so long as nothing too scary happens. Like I mentioned, myself and some buddies walked over to the community college and sat down at some tables chowing down on our food. I remember we tried to think of an excuse we could give the teachers as it seemed they were catching up to our tricks. Suddenly, we're interrupted by an alarm, followed by a message over the intercom system. It's telling all the students to shelter in place and to try blocking any entryways. We were confused until some staff walked into the area and told us to remain quiet and vigilant. Now, I remind you once again that this is the 90s, so we have no way of checking our cell phones for any sort of updates on social media or even notifications from this school. We were in the dark, quite literally, as the staff inside the cafeteria area turns the lights off and everybody starts whispering, trying to come up with some sort of explanation. I remember hearing helicopters flying over the campus and even the sounds of police sirens. After about half an hour, another announcement is made over the intercom system, announcing the end of the lockdown. Once we exited the building, my group of friends and I could see a huge line of news reporters and police officers who we assumed were trying to get answers to their questions. We avoided them and returned to campus, but we were in for quite a scolding. I'll go ahead and explain it. First off, the reason for the lockdown. Turned out there was a police chase, and the would-be robbers stopped in the back parking structure of the community college and then made their run for it on the campus. Some students even saw them, which made the whole thing that much more creepier. The second part we learned was our high school went on a soft lockdown as a precaution. This is the point our teacher noticed we were missing. He called the principal's office, who then notified the police. Now, I did say we got quite a scolding, but it was more so with a concerned type of tone. The school was just happy we were safe and nobody was hurt. So that was the time I went on a lunch break that took a very scary and surprising turn. I will never forget the scary evening of December 12th, 2012. It was a night I would soon never forget, and it's a reminder of how anything can happen. What I'm about to tell you is 100% true, and it comes from myself, an eyewitness. You can even look up the incident if you don't believe me. So I'll describe the incident, and I'll even go into detail with how it started, including the outcome. So I was studying at Cal State Fullerton in Southern California, and it was your average, ordinary day. Students were sitting around campus talking with friends, studying for finals, where I found myself in Mahalo Hall, a building where most of the business majors spend time at. Inside Mahalo Hall, there's a Starbucks, and that's where I was sitting at. There I was, drinking a coffee, reading one of my online textbooks, and it's around 3:30 p.m. That's when I remember my friend Julia texting me. She said, "Hey, if you're bored, there's a police chase on TV. Funny enough, it's not too far from campus." Now, I know it sounds cruel, but how many of you are guilty for watching police chases live on TV? Show of hands, be honest. Yeah, that's what I thought. I texted her back saying that indeed I wasn't home and I was studying at school, and then I told her to provide me with updates, just for curiosity. Well, little did I know this curiosity would soon come knocking, quite literally 15 minutes later. Fast forward with those 15 minutes and I started to hear sirens. Not sirens from a fire alarm, mind you, but from the police. I tried not to pay attention to it as I really needed to get work done, but it became apparent that something was up when some of the students inside the Starbucks got up and started staring out the window. So I go ahead and look up, and sure enough, we can see 5 men running in all directions. One was caught by officers and one started running to our building. The other 3 head across the street. The man running into Mahalo Hall enters, and it soon becomes apparent what was happening. The police chase my friend had mentioned had stopped just outside our campus. The culprits, you guessed it, they were here. But here's the thing, we honestly thought that he was going to start firing off gunshots, but he sort of just runs off heading further into campus. Moments later, police storm Mahalo Hall and they're saying, "Which direction did he go in?" Students started pointing to the exit of Mahalo Hall and about 10 cops go running after him. Now, before continuing on with what happens next, including what I had to go through, let me tell you about what started this mess. An hour earlier in the city of Moreno Valley, 5 men in ski masks stormed a pawn shop, and they took everything they could. They were armed, which makes the whole situation that much more scarier. The team gets into a vehicle and leads the police on a wild chase. That's when almost an hour later they found themselves on our campus. So anyway, back to me. After seeing this crazy event unfolding right before me, I was left in shock, but also with the realization I was going to be late for my class. So I put my laptop away, throw my coffee out, and I make my way to the 3rd story. Mind you, I'm still in the same building. As I'm heading upstairs, police officers are shouting and telling everybody to head into a room and to lock themselves in place. This was now turning into a lockdown, and it became even scarier when I hear students running into the building with panic in their voice, saying that the man that ran onto campus had a gun. Well, I make it to my classroom where myself and about 70 other students spend the next few hours waiting in suspense. The whole time, the campus is updating us with text messages, telling us every little detail. Things such as, remain calm, keep all the doors closed, and don't open the door for anyone. Make sure to keep all the lights off, and put as much as you can between the door and yourselves. Reading those text messages was some of the scariest stuff ever. So you might be wondering, what did we do as we waited? Well, as we sat around on our phones huddling together, we began to come up with a plan if things were to go wrong. After a while, however, the SWAT team was able to get us out, and I left campus being welcomed by my mom and dad, who were crying tears of joy. Mind you, I was updating them with every little detail, and they were watching on the local TV fearing the worst. Sadly for some other students, they were on lockdown until almost midnight as they couldn't find the suspect. The fear was he had changed clothes and blended in with the students, but that wasn't the case. The man ended up getting away. So yes, a real-life scary ordeal that I hope no one ever has to go through. Like I mentioned, if you want more information, you can look up Cal State Fullerton 2012 lockdown, and it should be one of the first links you see. Anyway, that's my personal experience. Stay safe, friends, and take care. Occurring back in the late 2000s, I was going to community college to try and save myself some money. Most of my friends went to university right after high school, but I was that different dude, the one who couldn't decide on whether he just wanted to go to work or maybe at least get an associate's degree. I did get that associate's degree, and I landed a job doing inspections of buildings, but that's not really important to what I'm here to tell you all about. It all started when I had arrived to my English lecture. It was early as usual, and I met up with a fellow classmate, who for this retelling I'm going to call Christine. I had met her the previous semester in my math class, and we got along, having similar interests in art. That day of our lecture, had Christine and I joining another 3 students as the classroom was split up into teams of 5 for an activity. I forget exactly what we were going over, but all of a sudden my attention is brought to the entrance of the lecture hall. Bear in mind, there are at least 100 students in here, and I barely recognize anyone as it is. I instantly, however, recognized who had entered. It was Christine's obsessive, lack of confidence and protective boyfriend. He was the typical definition of a Chad that most people find annoying. Well, one thing was for certain, he didn't have this class. It's not like he was late to the first day. We were at least 2 months into the semester, so it's not like he transferred over or something. Anyway, he's looking around the room, and that's when he spots both me and Christine. I knew you were hanging out with him. Didn't I tell you to stop talking to him? Now, I'm going to quickly make a quick little detour so I can provide you with some more context with his boyfriend of hers. The only reason I knew he was super insecure and protective was because last semester, when we had that math class, Christine and I were studying in the library. That's when her boyfriend called her and asked her what she was doing. She said she was studying with me, and that's when he absolutely lost it. I still remember more or less what words he said since the volume on Christine's phone was kinda loud. Are you kidding me? I can't believe you're cheating on me. Don't tell me it's that kid from your math class, the one you've been talking to. Wait until I get my hands on him. Now I know what you're thinking. This Christine girl is pretty toxic, and I should have just stopped talking to her. I did for a while, but she kept texting me, and it's not like I could have avoided her since we had the same class. Also, she never brought up the boyfriend again, and I never asked about him either, so I assumed he was out of the picture. Anyway, back to when her boyfriend entered the classroom. He walks over to her group and then starts to curse me out. I would rather not repeat the words you said, but let's just say he was a sailor mouth. Christine told her boyfriend he needed to relax and that he was taking everything way out of context. Some other classmates who had no idea about the current situation did actually come to my defense. Even the professor told him he needed to leave. But that's when he does the unthinkable. He reaches into his backpack, and no joke, moments later, he takes out a pocket knife. There was an audible gasp as people start to scatter to the other side of the room. Meanwhile, the professor is telling him to drop the knife. I came here to teach this punk a lesson, and nobody is going to stop me. There is one last detail I haven't brought up, mainly because I think it would have spoiled the ending. I am a black belt in martial arts, and I've taken years of self-defense classes. That's why when Christine's boyfriend starts to approach me, I am able to take the knife away from him, albeit I did suffer quite a bit of cuts and scratches. Unfortunately, in my adrenaline rush, it falls out of my grasp due to my sweaty palms, and then it starts falling down the stairs. Christine's boyfriend chases after the falling knife, and then he runs out of the classroom. Everyone sort of just stood there in shock until my professor decides to lock the door. Needless to say, our community college went on lockdown, and about 45 minutes later, the campus was cleared. Now, as for Christine's boyfriend, he was later found at his apartment and was arrested for the scare and panic he had caused, as well as for attacking me. After that day, I actually ended up dropping the class, and I completely avoided Christine altogether. Maybe it was an overreaction, but I was scared that he might have come after my family, although that was impossible since he was in a jail cell. The last I heard of Christine came from a mutual friend. I guess she moved out of state and got married with somebody else a few years later. As for that boyfriend I mentioned, not sure where he is today, but I've never seen or heard from him again. Anyone else remember when you were a kid and when Valentine's Day rolled around, you'd get all excited for the candy and treats you'd get at school? I remember those years when my mom and I would go shopping and grab chocolates, candies, and those little Valentine's cards that come in those boxes you can hand out to your classmates. Now, I know I still have some of them somewhere in a box in my attic. I just need to find them so I can reread some of the messages my friends wrote to me. Now, while I can spend hours talking about all the good times in elementary school, as would anyone else, I want to instead focus on what happened to me in my school on Valentine's Day of 2003. It's a day I will never forget. Obviously, I'm not going to remember the exact dialogues of what everyone said, so understand that this is going to involve some paraphrasing. I also enlisted the help of a friend of mine to assist me with remembering some of the details I missed. We will call her Veronica. She is the only friend from elementary school I still talk to. She remembers this day as well, as she was in the same room as me. So anyway, to skip a lot of boring details, I want to jump to after lunch that day. All of us students had returned back to our classroom and we are now starting the Valentine's Day mini party. We were going around our class, handing out our little goodies and cards, and laughing amongst ourselves, as my teacher sat there at his table, grading some papers, and listening to the music he had playing over his computer. It was about 15 minutes in, and we're all suddenly interrupted by an alarm, followed by a message over the intercom system. We're going into lockdown. This is not a drill. 911 has been called. Please lock all your doors and stay away from any windows. All of us kids are starting to freak out, but in our innocent 6th grader minds, we think that this has to be some sort of sick joke. But it wasn't. My teacher now instructs everybody to get into the back corner of the room as he locks our door, closes the blinds, and shuts down the lights. Naturally, we're all starting to wonder just what exactly is going on as some of the kids start laughing and making jokes of the situation. I think this was their way to cope with the current events that were unfolding. I remember my teacher getting on the phone, and after he hung up, we saw the fear in his eyes, and we knew that this lockdown wasn't just something innocent. One of the students actually overheard the staff on the phone mention the word knife to our teacher since she was closest to him, and when we asked him about it, he just responded back with, "Yes, but we need to remain quiet and we need to remain calm until the police arrive." About 5 minutes into the lockdown, one of the kids, for whatever reason, decided to break away from the group that's huddled at the back of the room and now crawls over to peek through the blinds. My teacher, in his hushed voice, is angry and now telling him to come back to us. But what my classmates saw scared him so badly that he immediately ran back in fear, trying not to cry. Moments after that, we can see the door handle is beginning to shake, and everyone starts to freak out. "Don't open the door. He's got a huge knife. It's not the police," our classmate said, as my teacher then tries to comfort him and tells him to remain quiet. Moments that seemed to go on for an agonizing eternity that were only maybe less than 15 seconds. The door handle stops shaking, and we all start to let out sighs of relief, at least for now. A few minutes later, we are able to hear the sounds of police sirens, and even the sound of a helicopter above. I guess the whole police station had been called in. Needless to say, after a total of 45 horrifying minutes filled with anxiety and fear, the lockdown is lifted, and a police officer comes to our door to let us all out. By now, the school is filled with everyone's parents, including mine, who couldn't stop crying and thanking the heavens above that I and everyone else were safe. So anyway, here's the lowdown on what happened. It turned out that a guy who was on drugs and completely off his rockers was walking around the nearby neighborhoods with a large hunting knife. He just so happened to have walked onto our campus, and one of the hall monitors ended up noticing him. She immediately ran into a nearby room to notify the front office, who then called the police and issued the lockdown. It's just so scary to think that we were all involved in such a crazy incident. But if there was one good thing, no one, including the drugged up guy, were hurt. Well, I think they did end up tasing him from what I heard, but that was the least of his troubles. Years have now gone by, and any time I think about elementary school, that event sticks out to me the most. Really just goes to show you that anything can happen, even on Valentine's Day. This was in February of 2008, when I was a junior in high school. The day had started like any other, regretting staying up the previous night playing video games. If you're familiar with this time period, then you'll know Call of Duty 4 had just been released a few months prior. All the students at my school admittedly played it until the late hours of the night. This was why I was super tired and my eyes were red most of the day. I couldn't even pay attention, and it's surprising how I made it to each of my classes on time. Anyway, during 5th period chemistry class, which was right after lunch, I asked the teacher if I could go use the restroom. Normally she was very strict and would only let you go if you used one of your 5 bathroom passes, which were handed out at the beginning of the semester. If any of you had bathroom passes and you're listening now, then you're a real OG. I had none, but surprisingly she was feeling extra generous, and she allowed me 5 minutes to go and pee. Here's when things got crazy. You see, in order to get to the closest restroom, I had to go down this long hallway. It takes you about 20 seconds to reach the end if you're at a normal walking pace. Once you're at the end, you're met with the main area of the school where all the popular students hung out during lunch, as well as our 2 assigned 15-minute breaks. Anyway, I walked to my left for about 10 seconds. There is the restroom. As I'm looking at my phone, not paying attention to my surroundings, I ended up bumping into someone, which caused me to fall flat on my butt. Me already being grumpy from the lack of sleep expels some not so kind language, and that's when I can see it. In front of me was a gun in someone's hand. I froze as my eyes slowly rose higher, being met with a complete stranger in a ski mask. He also had a large duffel bag. Here's the thing, he wasn't alone. Another person with similar attire and mask, also with a handgun, was standing beside him. I was really expecting to bite the dust right there and then and get shot, but these men just run past me, heading down the hallway. I remember sitting there scared out of my mind, but more importantly, confused to what had just happened. Was it possible some seniors were filming for their end-of-year school projects? It was possible, but I saw no cameras. Also, I'm pretty sure you would get expelled or even arrested if you brought a prop pistol. Well, as I start to stand up, 5 police officers come running in my direction, telling me to get to a safe area. All I did was point in the direction of where I saw the armed men, and they chase after them. Meanwhile, I run into the restroom and hide in the bathroom stall. Within seconds, there's an announcement over the school's speaker system, and it's telling all teachers, staff, and students to take cover and lock themselves in place. I must have been in that restroom for at least 20 minutes. Meanwhile, I was texting my friends who were in a different class. They told me their teachers had turned off all the lights, and they barricaded the doors with chairs and tables. After what felt like an eternity, an all-clear message is announced over the speakers, and I ended up stepping out of the restroom. Students and staff were starting to walk out of their classrooms, heading toward the main area I mentioned earlier. I soon met up with my classmates and teacher, who was so relieved to see I was safe. Anyway, school was canceled indefinitely for the rest of that day, and about 30 minutes later, my dad picks me up. It wasn't until the next morning that everybody had received an email from the main office staff. Apparently, a couple of armed men had robbed a gas station across the street from our school. Police arrived just when the men were running out of the gas station, and that led them on a wild chase across the street to our high school. That's when I just so happened to have bumped into the men, where police officers were just a short pace behind them. I'll never forget that day, and it goes down as one of the scariest moments of my entire life. This happened in the 5th grade in the year 2001, and to this day, nothing has really been able to top just how crazy of an event it was. That day, we finally had the opportunity to play outside, as the whole entire week it had been raining really heavily. Most of the field we ran on was still too muddy to try playing tag or soccer, which is why I myself and other students played on the basketball courts or on the playground jungle gym. I played a few rounds of basketball with the 6th graders, and then after I got my butt whooped in the scoring, I told them, "Good game," and then started to walk over to the jungle gym area. That's where I saw 2 of my other friends as they were playing jump rope, and I wanted to finally prove to them that I was the best. I guess as kids, the idea of competition was implanted in our heads. I mean, who doesn't like impressing the cute girl everyone has a crush on? As a side note, there was one time I had been doing a jump rope competition with my fellow classmates, and I pretty much ate the floor and tripped, falling face first on the concrete. Luckily, not any crazy damage to my face or anything, but I did scrape my arms as I came down to the floor to brace for the impact. Anyway, we were jump roping and laughing, having a good time for I'd say 10 or so minutes, when our group happened to look toward our right, and that's when we heard somebody yelling at us. We're looking at a fencing that separates the school and the nearby neighborhood, by the way. It's this homeless, disheveled man that's just in underwear and shoes, and he's got a backpack on. He had a long, dirty blonde hair, a scar underneath his right eye, and some cheap tattoos on his left arm. He was making violent threats, saying he was going to kill everyone, and that the government was secretly trying to kidnap him. It was really creepy, and all the students stopped what they had been doing as everyone's just watching him. This rant of his, with him stating violent threats and shaking the fence, lasts for another 30 or so seconds, until a teacher finally comes over and is telling all the students to head back to their classrooms. Of course, most students didn't listen, as myself, my friends, and maybe about 70% of students just continued to watch. Some more teachers come over to finally get us to move, but that wasn't all it would take for us to move, because the guy suddenly does something truly insane. He takes off his backpack and then reaches in for something. One of the teachers says everyone get inside, as a large knife is suddenly taken out. He now starts to climb over the fence, and by this point everyone is at a pretty safe distance. As you'd expect, we now go into lockdown, and it lasts for about 30 minutes as the police arrived and began searching for this crazy dude. I won't lie when I say those were some of the scariest 30 minutes in my entire life, since at one point we could hear him near our door, continuing to scream out a bunch of nonsense and saying he was going to kill everyone. When all was said and done, the cops had to shoot him, which unfortunately myself and some students saw firsthand from peeking out the window, and unfortunately for him, due to his injuries, he did later pass away in the hospital, which was relayed to us a bit later on. I did have to go to therapy for quite a while, as seeing someone get shot at such a young age puts a heavy trauma and toll on your young mind. It's just so crazy because when I learned he had been on drugs, it made me wonder just what kind of issues was that man going through. I mean, most people aren't just going to be taking some heavy-duty drugs and then go to a school and try to stab people, unless, like I said, they are under the influence and are in a changed state of mind. If there is one good outcome, it's that no students were harmed. Scared and traumatized out of our minds, sure, but safe, all in all. By the way, this might not be part of my story, but I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Creepyfox for all he does. I know there might be days when it seems your recovery is at a standstill. I know myself, I broke my leg in a skiing accident a couple of years ago, and I was so impatient with the recovery time. But you're strong, your body will heal, and we all believe in you. Keep fighting the good fight, my friend, and stay blessed. I'll never forget this field trip, as it was the first time in my life, and I guess you could say in my fellow classmates' lives as well, where we felt genuine fear and this overall sensation of hopelessness. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What a way to start off my submission, and I guess you're sorta right. But after you've heard about my scary story, you'll think, wow, that escalated very quickly. So for some context, I'm male, 27 years of age, just your typical dude who works a Monday to Friday job, comes home, plays video games with friends, sleep, rinse and repeat. Though I could tell you more about my life, instead I'm going to rewind the clock, back to a better time, the 6th grade. A time when life was a little bit more simple. No need for work or responsibilities, or even having to worry about your next paycheck. All you had to really worry about was just having your friends, homework, and Saturday morning cartoons. Anyway, this field trip I'm writing about was to a huge farm that one of the universities in my city owned. It featured many different species of animals, like goats, sheep, cows, pigs, chicken, you name it, and we learned about them through various workshops that were set around the fairgrounds. In total, it was roughly 30 students with a couple of teachers, and of course the adults who were giving the lessons. At around lunchtime, roughly 1 p.m., we were given a 30-minute break to eat our packed lunches, as well as being able to talk with our fellow friends at some of the tables. I sat alongside my friend Jessica, who I'm actually still friends with today, and I recall us talking about Pokemon or something like that, since we were huge fans at the time. While everything was peaceful and quiet, I remember there being some music being played over a radio, and we started to hear helicopters in the distance. At first, it wasn't really a big deal, but then suddenly one of the adults at the farm came racing over and advised everybody to head into the large barn where we had just learned about farming. We weren't sure what was happening, but as we began to all race inside, we can see somebody running in the distance, heading toward our area. He was followed by a bunch of police officers, and we could even see and hear a canine as well. Needless to say, we all hunkered down inside the barn as we ended up hearing gunshots sound off. That was probably one of the scariest moments of our life, as any form of gunshots we heard up to that point came from movies or TV shows. After about 15 minutes of waiting in anticipation and cops coming to our rescue, the all clear was given and we ended up being allowed to exit. As it turned out, the police had been in pursuit of an armed robber who had just robbed a jewelry store a little bit earlier. The thing is, the man had shot at the police officers, and the police officers had shot at him, but we did end up seeing in the news report a couple of days later that the man survived his injuries. But anyway, we did make it back to school safely that afternoon, and when my parents arrived, they ended up hugging me extra tightly. But could you really blame them? After all, it's not every day you're put in a situation such as this. So yeah, that's my retelling of the time that we went on lockdown while on a field trip. By the way, thanks for all the awesome scary stories videos, Creepy Fox. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to your next animation episode. I was going through a pretty interesting time in 2010. Apart from just starting college and being happy to be attending the university I always dreamed of, I felt as if I was missing something. Sure, my parents always strived for me to focus on my studies, but part of me wanted to get into the workforce. I blamed this overachieving on my older brother, who went on to become a doctor. That's why I was very excited to hear that just a month after classes began, our university was going to be throwing a job fair. I had actually heard of it from fellow friends of mine, and they were able to secure themselves with awesome jobs. One friend got a job working as a park ranger, and another one is currently on his way to become a firefighter. As I was following in the steps of my brother in the medical field, I was one of the first to head to the huge auditorium in which the fair was being held. Music could be heard jamming out of big speakers, and crowds of students could be heard conversing of their bright and wonderful futures ahead of them. I appreciated the warm welcome a couple of students gave me when I entered the building, as I now began looking for the medical booths, which there were quite a few. I had thought about nursing, thus I went ahead and talked to a couple of students who were currently interning at a local hospital. They gave me all the information that I needed, including a pamphlet and some business cards. I then left them my cell phone and email address. Once I left, I got stopped by a man asking me if I was looking for work. He was average looking. He was dressed in a business casual outfit, had slicked back brown hair, and large glasses. Yeah, actually, I just finished talking with some of the people at the medical booth. I'm looking to become a nurse, I gleefully replied, being filled with excitement from the music playing over the speakers and the overall positive energy around me. Is that so? That's incredible. I'm currently scouting for people that are interested in the medical field. Would you like to leave me your email and cell phone? This was where I made one of the most naive and most dumb decisions of my early adulthood, trusting a stranger with my phone number. Awesome. Here, have a flyer. It's got a lot more information in case you're interested. Have a good afternoon. The man then walked away to speak with some other girls. Now, the flyer he had given me was questionable at best. It looked as if it was made from a template, with the only important detail being the logo for the company he apparently represented. It was called Jerry Myers Enterprises, a company that helps college students find work. Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either, which was why later that evening in my dorm room I tried to look it up, but I got no results. Hey, have you heard of this Jerry Myers Enterprises? Some man on campus gave me this flyer saying that he was recruiting people, I said to my roommate Skylar, who also had a look of confusion on her face. I can't say I have. Are you sure you didn't just type it incorrectly? Nah, I'm pretty sure I did. I just tried a bunch of different spellings too, and I've got nothing. Confused out of our minds, both Skylar and I soon forget about the company, but that's until roughly a week or so later. This is where I found myself in bed watching Netflix on my laptop, and I was suddenly interrupted by a text message from an unknown number. "Hey Lisa, how are you doing? It's been a while, hasn't it? Sorry, but I must not have your phone number. Who is this?" I texted back, thinking perhaps I deleted one of my friend's numbers on accident. "Why you gotta be that way, Lisa? Seriously, after all that time we spent in high school, you're going to forget your best friend? I'm sorry, but I still don't know who this is. Can you just tell me? Just guess." I ended up texting back with a friend's name, and the number responded back almost immediately with confirmation. "Bingo, this is Kelly. I haven't heard from you in a while, girl. I want to come visit you sometime." Now, just for some quick context, I mentioned Kelly because that was the name of one of my best friends that I had lost contact with. For months, I was hoping I could hear from her again, and it seemed as if this was the case. At least I thought. "Sure, I'm currently at university." "That's cool. What's your dorm number? Maybe you can let me visit you this weekend." I gave her the information and left it at that. Now fast forward a couple of days later to Saturday night. Kelly sends me a text message and asks me to meet her at her university's baseball stadium. "I've got some food I brought. I was thinking maybe we could sit in the seats and watch the sky above and catch up on life." "Awesome. Do you mind if I bring my friend Skylar with me? You'll love her. She's so funny, and she's really sweet too." Kelly texts me back in anger, and now she says that she wanted to meet me there by myself. "No, I just want it to be the two of us. Please don't bring anyone else. This should be our time." That did kind of raise some alarms. Kelly was always of the mentality of the more the merrier, which I reminded her of. I got a response a few minutes later with Kelly telling me that she just really wanted it to be us two. Things were growing a bit odd, so I called her out on this, and I wanted to hear her voice. She didn't respond to that request. Instead, she messaged me back saying that she lost her voice and she couldn't really talk. This was really starting to turn into quite the show, so I ended up bringing Skylar with me nonetheless. Now, the baseball stadium is all the way behind the university. Out there, you're really out of luck if you're trying to get someone's attention, which really made me ponder why she wanted to meet up there of all places. I mean, why would she be so excited to show up to my dorm, and then change her mind and ask me to meet her somewhere isolated and by myself? Eventually, we reached the outside of the baseball stadium, and I text Kelly back. "I'm here, Kelly. Where are you at?" "I thought I told you. No other people. Just you and me." I had enough, so I shouted out and said, "Kelly, if you really want to see me, then just come out here already." Moments later, we got the shock of a lifetime. A figure begins to approach Skylar and I from behind the ticket booth. "Kelly, is that you?" The person approaching, who had a hoodie covering their face, reveals moments later that they were not who they claimed to be. "Remember the man I met during the job fair? The one part of Jerry Meyer's Enterprises?" It was him, and worst of all, he took out a knife. Skylar and I went nope and run like the wind, screaming along the way as the creep now chases us. Once we were in a more lit up part of campus, we turned around only to see the man was now long gone. Naturally, we ended up calling the campus police, and they did a search of the university, but they found nobody matching our description. A few weeks later, with the help of descriptions and eyewitnesses, police were able to find and arrest him a few states over after he tried to lure some other college students who were thankfully wise to catch on to his tricks. Edit. I contacted the real Kelly a few nights after both Skylar and I had that strange incident, this happening before he was caught, by the way. After reconnecting our friendship, I explained what had happened, and she found the whole thing very bizarre. Her explanation was that he must have been waiting for me to give him enough information. That way he could pretend to be someone I knew when I gave him a name. From there, who knows what his plans were. But it is crazy to think that there are people out there that will go out of their way to try and get you. School group projects. Can I start off by saying they can be super hit or miss? I've had times growing up when I would be put into a group and everyone was super passionate about their work and got it done in a timely fashion. Then you had those dumb groups where no one wants to do anything. You end up having to do all the work, and to make it worse, you also end up with a low grade because the others didn't even try. I hate that in school, and I really do wonder why they still grade like that. I mean, do they still do that? Anyway, this is where I found myself in 2007 in the 10th grade, when for our Spanish class we were required to film a 3 to 5 minute infomercial of sorts in order to sell different products we had been assigned. We had to make an infomercial on selling a tennis set with the racket, the balls, and the clothing. The problem was, the 3 other students I was assigned to work with were all lazy and couldn't be bothered to want to meet up to record the video. As a requirement, we needed to all appear in the video in some sort of capacity. So wouldn't you know it, they all finally decided to meet up, literally the day before the project was due. Oh, and by the way, I was required to do the video editing since none of them knew how to do even that. Ugh, what it was like being paired with those popular kids. So anyway, we're on our high school campus Thursday afternoon at around 5 p.m. and we're filming our scenes in the school auditorium. It's just the 4 of us in there, including a janitor we saw mopping the floor towards the very back/top of the large room. The auditorium is sort of like a movie theater, where the seats start at the bottom next to the stage and then go upward toward a booth and a walkway. That's where the janitor is. To the right of the stage, there are 2 bathrooms. Bear in mind, in the time we had gotten there, we never saw anyone enter or exit those bathrooms. This will be important in just a second, I promise. We were just getting through one of the funnier portions of the skit, which had us use a cutout board prop at the back of the stage, when I happened to look toward the restrooms. Some really weird guy, who was definitely not a student, as he looked to be like in his early 40s, just walked out of the restroom, looking like a zombie. I'm not even trying to be mean here either. He just looked like one of the extras you would have seen out of The Walking Dead. Well, season 1 that is, when the actors weren't super crazy with all that zombie makeup. They looked a little bit more human. This guy definitely had seen his better days, but we thought maybe he was just some homeless guy or something who came in to use the restroom. Although why and how no one saw him walk on campus and question him is beyond me. My high school was and still is gated, and by 8 p.m. the gates were closed, but since there are still students and staff, technically anybody can walk onto campus. Nowadays, with all the shootings and whatnot, things have changed. Anyway, the guy just walks up on the stage and without any warning starts to ask us if we had any weed or crack on us that we could share with him. I mean, I'm a straight-edge kid back then and even now, not sure about those other classmates of mine, but surely we didn't have anything like that on us. We told him no, and then he just loses it. He starts to walk up to us and our group, freaked out as we begin to walk toward the stairs that leads you down to the seats. The guy is cursing at us, but by this point the janitor I mentioned earlier comes down to us and starts talking to the guy, telling him to leave or he was going to be getting the police. One of my classmates, we will call her Erica in this story, asked the janitor if she should go get someone, and the janitor tells us to go get the campus police officer who normally hangs out by the front entrance. Erica heads over there, as it's myself and the others just watching at a distance. "You need to leave. I'm asking you kindly. Please leave," the janitor said. The man didn't listen. Instead, he just starts to walk up the stairs. But now, something happens that sent chills down our spines. He subtly turns around and does a complete 180 and puts his hand in his jacket pocket. He takes out a small pocket knife and then starts to approach the janitor, telling him he was going to kill him. Now here's the thing. The janitor isn't just any ordinary janitor. He was a retired Marine veteran, and from what we later learned from him, he's dealt with tougher and scarier situations before. As he lunges at the janitor, who does get a cut on his arm, he does disarm the man and puts him into an arm hold. The janitor now kicks the knife away and tells us to quickly secure it, which we do. The on-campus police officer gets there about a minute later, and luckily they are able to get the man detained, as more officers arrived about 10 minutes later to back them up. By now, my dad had come to pick me up, and we ultimately decided to cancel the filming. An exception was made due to what happened, and we were given a few extra days to work on the project, which was pretty nice. We ended up getting a solid B on the project, which was not great, not terrible. By the way, please tell me one of you gets the not great, not terrible reference. You're awesome if you do. Anyway, the janitor ended up getting praised by the police officers and all the students and staff on campus, and every time I saw him, I always made sure to say hello to him and wish him a good day, since I never did before. So that's my school story. The time some guy who I almost certainly knew was on drugs asked us for crack, and then pulled the knife out on the janitor, but got his butt whooped in the process. For some context, this comes from the perspective of a female who at the time was a freshman in high school. This was the fall of 2006. Speaking of which, I had just started this high school adventure in a completely different state, from California to Arizona, since my dad had been offered a better job opportunity. It sucked since I was leaving behind all my friends that I had known since elementary school and junior high school, and although we could call each other, it just wasn't the same. The first day of school was rough. Not knowing anyone, I kinda just kept to myself, although I did hit it off with some of the older students in my art class, which was one of my electives. We will call them Jasmine and Chelsea. They were both 16 years old. Over the coming days, we would talk more and more in class as we worked on our art projects together, and soon I started to hang out with a group of about 10 during lunch and after school. It was great. Finally, I wasn't feeling so alone in person. Fast forward a little under a month later, and it's the homecoming football game. Both Jasmine and Chelsea had invited me to go with them, and at about 7 p.m. on Friday afternoon, once I'd gone home to change and take a shower, my dad drops me off at school and I meet up with the girls as we had to go grab some nachos and drinks from the little stands that were set up selling food. Jasmine was in front of both Chelsea and I ordering a churro, and as we talked, a middle-aged man came up to us and started to ask us how our night was going and if we had a favorite player. It seemed like just normal, friendly talk, so I didn't think much of it as I answered his questions, and he seemed to just smile and nod. I did ask him if he was here to see one of his kids playing or one of his kids was around. I don't know why I asked it, I just did. And now he tells us, "Oh no, I'm just here to watch the game. I love football." It seemed alright, but I was starting to get a bit uncomfortable when I caught him staring at my chest and saying that I was really pretty. My friends told me that he was a creep, but whatever, he was now gone as he walked away. Fast forward about an hour later, and it's well into the football game. I was starting to get the urge to pee and told my friends I was going to be right back. Jasmine tells me she needs to go too, and so accompanies me down the stands toward the restrooms that are by the parking lot. There's lots of noise right now and plenty of people to walk past, so that's why I didn't really notice him until I bumped into him. Remember the guy from the line from earlier? Well, of all people, I bump into him, and he says, "Oh, I missed you too. It's good to see you again." I could smell alcohol in his breath, and I once again caught him staring down at my chest. Bear in mind that no alcohol was sold here, so he clearly had started drinking, since I didn't smell alcohol on his breath when I had seen him originally. "Where are you going? May I ask you?" I didn't answer him. I just walked past him as his other friends got distracted, and he now starts to follow Jasmine and I. Since I was so shy to say anything, Jasmine spoke up for me and said, "She's not interested in you, pervert. Why don't you just leave?" She said this so loudly, even over the noise that was going on around us. Everyone in the vicinity looked around and turned in our direction. This man's face turned red, and instead of just walking away, he tries to explain by saying, "Haha, you two are funny. Wait until your mom hears about how you've been treating your dad." He grabs my arm and tries to pull me closer. I was disgusted and creeped out by this. He was trying to play it off by pretending to be our dad, but clearly he wasn't. Now, I could keep going on, but there's not much else to this story other than a couple of security guards did walk on over and escorted the man off the property after I pushed him off of me. He did act like a big man-child over being kicked out. People actually cheered at him being kicked out, which served him right for being such a creep. That was really it. I did go to a few more football games after that, but I never saw nor encountered that man again. I would really like to hope he learned his lesson and didn't try to continue to pick up high school girls, because that's just absolutely disgusting and totally creepy. Hey everyone, this is a quick programming note here from the Creepy Fox himself. This next story we're going to be covering goes over a bullying incident that happened to someone that our subscriber knew. It is a more serious story with some very real and scary results that will really open your eyes to how serious the bullying epidemic is. It can lead to some very serious consequences, and as you'll hear in this story, it could have cost the lives of others. If you or someone you know is getting bullied, there is help. Talk to someone you can trust and seek that help. If, of course, this is a subject matter that you may find hurtful or disturbing, or that it might be too much for you to handle, please use the timestamps provided to skip this story. If this subject matter is okay with you, here is that story submission in its entirety. This was in 2003 when I used to live in my small town in Michoacan, and I was in what would be equivalent to the 7th grade in the United States. I was friends, or I guess more like an acquaintance with, this really shy kid, who for my retelling I will refer to as Jose. He was the nerdy kid, like me, who enjoyed video games, cartoons, and reading comic books. Unfortunately, however, This was in the summer of 1999 when I was 8 years old. I'm female, by the way. My uncle had come to visit us from Juneau, Alaska, since he had time away from work, since he's always been the planner of sorts, and the really rich uncle who gets all of us nice things. He convinced my parents, as well as my other Aunt Susan, and her 2 sons, them being my cousins Jack and Thomas, aged 9 and 7 respectively, to take a 1-week vacation adventure to Las Vegas and to the Grand Canyon. For context, we were driving from Laguna Beach, California. Now, we would be staying at Circus, and while all of that was fun and all, the point to me writing to the Creepy Fox is to share what happened while on the way to the Grand Canyon. To this day, it cements the reality of the world around us. You see, it is sad how there are creeps out there that lurk on the innocence of others, especially when it comes to children. Oh, but let there be an adult around, and they act like cowards and scatter like cockroaches, absolute scum of the earth. Yeah, you can probably already tell I don't much like creeps. Anyway, we were still a couple of hours away from the Grand Canyon after spending 4 days in Vegas playing games and swimming in the pool. And for a late lunch, we decided on stopping in a rest area of sorts with a gas station in it. There was also a McDonald's with a play place and a Subway which was attached to said gas station. Naturally, us 3 kids wanted to go to the McDonald's as it would be a nice break from sitting in the car for so many hours. All the adults agreed. Thus, we made the decision to stay. We all ordered the same kids meal, and after we had our fill of salt and sugar, we go into the play place where we're happy to see it's pretty much a ghost town in there. It was exciting considering you rarely get an opportunity to play in the play place, especially without getting interrupted by other kids. Anyway, while I was climbing on top of the jungle gym area, my other 2 cousins playing with the Nintendo 64s that are there were only 2. I happened to look out the huge glass window, This was an indoor play place with air conditioning, and I noticed a middle-aged, shaggy-looking man just staring over at my cousins in a strange fashion. I don't mean just a casual glance. I'm talking about he's pressed up against the glass windows, with his hands clasped out to his face. Also, this is the summertime, but he's full on got a hefty sweater and jeans on, unless he was trying to lose weight for some reason. I don't really remember him being a fairly large individual, but then it was strange seeing him dressed in a fashion that could have given him heat exhaustion, if not worse. But I digress. I eventually went down the slide, and when I exit the tunnel of said slide, the guy was gone. Well, whatever, I say to myself. Must just be my over-imagination. I walk over to my cousins and I ask them if they had seen the guy looking at them, but they said no, which figured as such since they're boys and they're focused on the video games. If I remember correctly, the McDonald's had Mario Kart 64 set up. Well, by now, I'm starting to feel my bladder screaming at me to go and use the restroom. Thus, I told my cousins I would be right back, and they just nod their heads. I go inside the McDonald's, and at this point some more customers had arrived, making the place a bit more lively. No signs of that creepy guy. I make it over to the restroom, where I bumped into my uncle, who says he's going to walk over to the gas station to fill up the car. That way we didn't have to worry about it after we were all done eating. I said sweet, and I walk in to do my business. Now what happens next was so quick, so fast, that it's one of those blink and you'll miss it kind of deals. I'd finished my business, and as soon as I opened the restroom door, the male side restroom opened as well. It was that shaggy guy from outside a few minutes ago. I gave him a quick smile and a nod, even though something about him earlier did give me the heebie-jeebies, and when I turned to go down the small walkway that connects this back area to the rest of the McDonald's, he jumps in front of me and then blocks my way. Why he did that? I was confused, but when I suddenly see as he grabs and picks me up, putting me over his shoulder, like the killer does in Dead by Daylight, if you've ever played that game you'll know what I'm referring to, I now knew this was trouble. I was being kidnapped, and this creep was taking advantage of the fact nobody was back here. By the way, even though this is all happening in real time, it felt like slow motion to me. All I remember next happening was me trying to wiggle my way off as I start screaming at the top of my lungs, but I'm not able to hear any sort of noise. I remember seeing my mom at the very back of the McDonald's as she has the view of the door, and she suddenly perked up and her mouth opens to scream, but again, for some reason I can't hear anything at all. The doors to the McDonald's opens as a huge blast of warm air presses against my cheeks, and my eyes squint to the brightness of the outdoors and the sunlight above. Almost as soon as this had all begun, I begin falling to the ground. Again, at least it seems like to me, it's happening in slow motion. But why was I falling? I would find out in just a mere seconds when all my senses returned and I see and hear my uncle just a few feet away. The creep had let me go, and he tries to take off running, screaming and shouting and heading to a nearby parked van with all its windows tinted. He yelled at the driver to wait up, but the van drove off without him. I now saw as my uncle took a heavy swing at the back of this creep's head, which sees him almost instantly fall down to the hot pavement below. My uncle now gets on top of him and then puts him into an armbar hold and yells over to me asking to go inside and to get help. I did, as I finally realized the reality of the situation. My dad and two other large men stormed out of the front doors before I get the chance to go in there. They help with subduing this creep. My mom and aunt now came to get me, and we go inside the McDonald's where one of the employees is now calling 911. Cops arrived in about 15 minutes. The whole time, my uncle, my dad, and the other two men are not letting the man go. And long story short, the cops handcuff the creep and take him away. I did get questioned by one of the nice officers, and she told me that I was safe and the creep was no longer a threat. Though, fast forward about a week later, I would have recurring nightmares. Anyway, speaking of fast forwarding, I'm now a mom and I have 2 kids myself. I've told them this story on several occasions, and they get the chills anytime they hear it. I mean, it really is crazy when you think about it. One minute you're on vacation with your family and you're enjoying your nice summer break. The next thing you know, a random guy grabs you and attempts to kidnap you to do who knows what. I am thankful for my uncle being there at the right place at the right time. I still believe had things not been timed the way they were, where my uncle was now walking back to the McDonald's, things could have ended worse. Not that I think my parents would have been able to catch up to me, but considering this creep was working with an accomplice in a nearby vehicle, they might have gotten me into that van, and we probably would have driven off into the desert, where I might have never been heard from ever again. So my warning to all of you out there, please try your best to stay safe, and parents out there, look after your kids and don't keep your eyes off of them no matter what. This was 2013. The McDonald's I used to work at definitely saw quite an interesting cast of characters, if you really want to call it that. And no, I'm not referring and talking about Ronald McDonald and the other characters. I'm talking about the customers themselves. Sure, you would get plenty of Karens and Kevins, but then you got those really weird people, the ones who would just stare at you, catcall you, and then get angry anytime you call them out on it. Or what about those customers that would get angry because they were waiting for so long, even though the place was jam-packed during rush hour? Ugh, but I guess that's every job where they feel like you owe them the world. But maybe I'd rather save those stories of dealing with rude customers for another day. Let me instead tell you about this one in particular. I was working the window in the evening, and we were now starting to wind down from the evening rush we had received just an hour prior. My manager was doing her rounds checking up on all of us, and when she got to me, my back was turned toward the window, by the way. I heard a knock and see my manager's facial expression change. I looked back in the direction she was looking, toward the window. I heard a knock and I see my manager's facial expression change. I looked back at the direction she was looking, and there's a homeless lady, the one that I've dealt with plenty of times before in the past when she would harass me for no reason whatsoever, and she was flailing her arms around, acting like she was high off of some drugs. My manager from the windows says that she'll take care of this, and when she opens the window to see what's up with her, she curses at her and then says that she wanted to talk to me. Okay, well, this is quite bizarre. Again, there was nobody else in the drive-thrus, so I just put my best customer service face on, sucked it up, and said, "Hi ma'am, if you want to order something, could you come inside and do it there? This is supposed to be for vehicles only." Oh, you should have seen her. She got so angry with me she started to bang her arms against the glass, calling me vulgar names, and then going as far as saying that she wanted to take a metal rod and stick it, well, down there. Sorry, I'm trying to help the creepy fox from not getting demonetized for telling my story. Anyway, it's just words she's saying, and my manager is asking if I want to take a break, but I said I'm good, it's whatever. She walked away as one of the cashiers said that she needed help with a customer, and when she saw and heard the yelling, she cringed and she whispered, "Yeah, good luck with that," in a joking fashion. Thanks, I guess. Well, finally, I did see a car pulling up to the menu outside, so I focused my attention to the vehicle and I saw the lady walked away. Well, at least whatever hatred she had toward me in that moment had dwindled away. But don't forget about her just yet, because we fast forward to the end of my shift. I was now tired, I smelled like french fries and oil, and I just wanted to get into my apartment, step into the tub and let the warm water and soap wash away the stress of the day. Well, after I bid my co-workers a good evening, and I start making my way through the parking lot, having my keys in my hand, I heard yelling to my right. It was like something straight out of a horror movie, because that lady from earlier comes out from behind one of the large bushes, and she's got this rusty old crowbar. I'm going to kill you, she said in a sing-songy type voice. Now my body went cold and shivers go down my spine as the look across her face said it all. Why was she targeting me? Sure, she gave me issues before in the past, but this was the first time she was acting so violently toward me. Now she's coming after me with a crowbar. I did what any normal human being would do in this situation. Since I was already so close to my vehicle, I quickly jumped inside as she proceeds to smash said crowbar against the side of my door, causing a huge dent to form. I'm now desperately fumbling around with my keys, scared out of my mind and my wits, trying to put the keys into the ignition, and then she smashes the glass window on the back seat behind where I sat. I basically floored it out of there, immediately deciding I'm going to the police station to report that I was being attacked. Luckily, there were already some police officers standing outside drinking some coffee when they saw me running up to them, and I had this look of pure horror on my face. They then drove over to the McDonald's as I sat there crying and shaking as a female police officer comforted me. Long story short, the police would catch up with the woman, and finally they did actually arrest her, since other times they just let her go as she actually hadn't caused anyone any harm. The crazy lady was actually inside the McDonald's ranting about me when they got there, and she was saying how I had gotten away, which my co-workers had relayed to me. Again, I don't know what kind of issue she had with me. I was always very professional, albeit sometimes scared with what she would say to me. I ended up resigning from that McDonald's a month later, and I started working at a Costco in the deli section, where I'm still at today. So much nicer here, as the area is a lot less sketchy, and people are actually really nice to me. So anyway, that's my scary story of the time that I had to deal with a crazy lady who wanted me dead. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder, go ahead and check down below the video and just double check to make sure you're subscribed. I've been getting a lot of comments recently of people telling me that they've been getting unsubscribed from my channel and that they haven't been notified of my uploads. And it's a shame because I know so many of you enjoy these videos, but then you never get notified of my videos because again YouTube either doesn't notify you or they unsubscribe you, so just double check. But yeah, let's continue on with these scary stories. 1997 was a pretty rough year for me. I was fresh out of high school with only my mother and twin siblings who were 10 at the time by my side. My father had passed away of cancer, not even being able to see me graduate. It was rough on my mom since she was having to work extra just to be able to pay for everything. I told my mom that I wanted to help her out as well, so I started working at McDonald's, first as part-time, but then eventually I got full-time when I became a manager. Now, while I do have some stories of when I was a manager there, there's one story in particular that stands out the most when I was just about 3 months into the job. The night I was working had been going by fairly routine. I recall it had been raining that night, and I was at that moment in the restroom just finishing up using the toilet. I flushed. I heard the door to the restrooms open, and somebody was speaking random gibberish. At first I thought it was a couple of the local teenagers that like to come to the McDonald's and act immature, but when I opened the bathroom stall, it was one of the homeless men that would hang out in the area and ask me and others for money. He never really bothered me up to that point, so I just gave him a nod of acknowledgement as he stopped speaking and now walked over to the sink to wash his hands as well. I remember saying something like, "Nice night we're having," or something like that to break the awkward silence, and he just dead on looks into my eyes and says, "I didn't ask for your opinion." Rude, but whatever. I guess he was just having a bad night. It happens to all the best of us. I'm now blow drying my hands and he walks up behind me, and I think, he's just waiting to do the same thing. But then I swear to you, as I'm not paying attention, I feel something poke on my back, and the guy whispers to me, "I got a knife against your back. Don't you dare make any sort of sudden movements and do as I say." Naturally, when someone says they have a weapon up against your back, you're going to get all these questions that suddenly enter your head. Is he serious? And if so, what does he want with me? I remember nervously laughing and saying, "Haha, yeah right dude, shut up." I turned around and he now grabs my wrist, and then I swear to you, he pushes a small switchblade up to my face and tells me to stop squirming or he was going to stab me in the neck. I'm a fairly small built guy for my age, 5'8", 160 pounds, against this 6', 180 pound male. If I even tried fighting back, surely I was going to be in for it, but it's like something in me took over. I guess fight or flight, and I chose fight, because without thinking, with all of my might, I clenched my fist and punched him straight on in the neck as hard as I could. The recoil causes him to let go of me and step back a few feet as I now take the opportunity to exit the restroom as I bump into, of all people, 2 police officers, presumably going to use the restroom. Thank the heavens above, I didn't even get a chance to say much other than, "Man with a knife in the restroom." I now make a run for it as I remember the police officers backing up and taking out their guns and shouting commands at the restroom door saying, "Drop the knife." It was a standoff for about 2 or 3 minutes, but eventually the door slowly opens and the guy in the restroom throws the knife out and surrenders. Thank God there was nobody else in the restroom then, because I truly believe he could have taken somebody hostage. To keep a long story short, they handcuff him and they take him away, but not before I remember the homeless man staring me down with a look of pure evil and hatred. I would continue to work there for a few more years, eventually becoming a manager, as I mentioned before, but I never did see that guy again. Safe to say, had things not gone down the way they did, who knows what might have happened to me. All of this California rain that we've been getting pounded with reminds me of an event that happened back in 2001 when I went to McDonald's after I got out late from work. I just pulled up into the parking lot of said McDonald's, and almost immediately I got approached by a homeless man who was asking if I had some extra cash on me because he wanted to buy food. I told him as long as it was for food, then I had no problem getting it for him, and we now walked inside as he had a huge smile across his face. He ordered a Big Mac with fries and a drink, and I got my usual order of chicken nuggets. After ordering, he properly introduced himself. His name was Don. We struck up a conversation talking about how he had lost his son and his wife in a car accident a couple of years prior, and how he had been homeless now for the last 3 months. I felt really bad for him, and I did my best to give him some words of encouragement, telling him of all the great programs that are out there for people that had fallen on tough times. He once again thanked me for those kind words, as well as for his meal I'd purchased for him. He told me about how I was the first person to have ever done something so nice for him now that he was homeless, and that most people either ignored him or gave him money and didn't want to speak. I told Don it was no problem, and now before we knew it, our food was ready. Now, seeing as I was taking this food to go home, Don asked me if it would be cool if he could walk with me to my car, as from there he was going to go to the little shelter he had set up. I asked him why he didn't prefer eating in the restaurant, and he responded by saying, "I get a lot of people will stare at me and give me funny faces, so I feel uncomfortable eating in there." I said, "Okay," and we now start exiting the McDonald's, and we enter the parking lot. And here's when things are about to take a turn further downright horrifying, as in our lives, both mine and Dawn's, are about to change forever. We're just casually walking when all of a sudden we hear somebody yelling behind us alongside the roar of a car engine. Dawn turned around at this point, and before I even get a chance to do the same thing and react, he pushes me with all his might, which causes me to go flying and land in a nearby bush. You might ask yourself, why? Why would he do this? We seem to have hit it off like a couple of long-lost brothers. Well, Don didn't do this to try and hurt me on purpose. He did it to save my life. You see, because as all of this is happening in slow motion, I see Don's body ragdoll as it gets hit by an SUV and then falls limp on the concrete next to me. Seconds after that, I hear a loud bang, and then I see the SUV that hit him crash into a nearby light post. Sparks from said light post now begin sparking down below as I see smoke begin to fume out of the car that crashed. Well, okay, let's slow down a little bit because I just described so much in just a short time. So once I realize the extent to what I just witnessed, I now get up and quickly make my way over to Dawn, who was struggling to breathe, and I start to see some blood begin to come out of him. I was now fighting back tears at this point and catching myself visibly shaking as people from inside the McDonald's, and even from outside, are running over to come and help. Dawn was hurt pretty badly, but luckily of all places, there was a nurse who was waiting in the drive-thru of the McDonald's who ended up coming over to help as police were being called. The guy who had been driving the SUV, from what I remember, somehow was barely scratched by the accident that he had got himself into, and I could see that he started to freak out, saying that he hadn't seen the guy and how he was sorry, etc., etc. Well, in that moment, my main concern was for Dawn. He was slipping in and out of consciousness and having a hard time breathing, but luckily after what seems like an agonizing eternity, the paramedics and the police arrive and they get Dawn into the back of an ambulance. I asked the paramedics which hospital they were going to, and they told me that they were going to take him to the nearby hospital. Luckily, it's very close to the McDonald's. It was less than 5 minutes away. Well, I'm happy to report that Dawn would make a recovery from the freak accident, although he did have to get a couple of surgeries, and he ended up needing to walk with a cane. That random evening that we met each other brought us together like long-lost brothers, as I mentioned we were. I worked with Dawn after he made a recovery to get him a little job, and he even cleaned up from the street drugs he had been using, and eventually he got himself a small home. Dawn would pass away in January of 2019 at the age of 74 of natural causes. I'll be perfectly frank with all of you. I still miss Dawn to this day. He was a genuine human being, and he did have his faults, just like everyone else, but he did his best to live a good life, and I'm glad I was able to at least be part of some of it. As for whatever happened to the guy who ran into him, I did end up finding out that he was under the influence of alcohol that night and drove into the McDonald's parking lot, hitting Dawn in the process. Thank God it wasn't at an even faster speed, because that would have killed him. Anyway, I hope you can continue to rest easy, my friend, and I hope that the creepy fox can share this story as a reminder of memento mori. It's an old saying which means know your mortality. We all have an expiration date on this planet. There's nothing we can do to change that. But there is one thing that you can do. Live your life to the fullest. Don't take it for granted, and remind your loved ones how much they mean to you. The McDonald's I used to work at back in the early 2000s in Detroit was quite notorious for getting a lot of drunks at like 2 or 3 a.m. and they would often come in to get their fix of french fries and hamburgers. Because we would often get a lot of them, it also meant that we had to deal with a lot of creepy incidents with female co-workers being harassed by drunk male customers. My manager Marcus was always making sure to keep a lookout for these creeps to protect us. Well, one night, I was working at that McDonald's would prove to be different from the rest because of just how things went from bad to worse in the blink of an eye. It was during a quiet moment of foot traffic when the McDonald's was empty, and after getting bombarded by a bunch of partying college students from the nearby bars, I'm just standing around talking to my co-worker Nancy. She was older than me in her early 50s, and she was pretty much like a mother to everybody there. All of a sudden, a man in a hoodie enters the McDonald's and just starts ranting at us for no reason whatsoever. He was going on about how he had just recently lost his job. His wife had left with his 2 kids, and now the wife was trying to take everything that he owned. We listened to the guy as my manager came out to ask him to relax and calm down, and just like that, in a blink of an eye, like I told you about earlier, This crazed, deranged man pulls out a gun and then starts waving it in the air and saying he was going to shoot up the place in pure anger, and then he was going to go after his wife. Naturally, when we heard that, we all went cold, and shivers went down our spine as we feared for our lives. I was too shocked to say anything, but Nancy, bless her heart, in a calm and collected fashion, talks to the man and tells him how it's not worth it and that everything was going to be okay. The guy was still pretty angry as he continued to wave the gun around, and one of the cooks in the back had just called the police to report what was happening. Nancy and my manager are still trying their best to be brave and de-escalate the situation. I still couldn't say anything because I was so scared, but after much convincing, the man relaxes and then proceeds to drop the gun to the ground and then starts crying. Police had arrived at this point, and he starts saying how he was sorry he had done this to us and that he just wanted somebody to listen to him. The police, with their guns drawn, soon come in to put the man into handcuffs, and the tense moments are finally brought to a close. I had trouble sleeping for the following weeks, and when I saw Nancy again, I asked her how in the world she could have been so brave when I myself was so scared and I couldn't move. She said that she wasn't sure herself, but she does think that having kids and having dealt with problems in her life before, she was able to find some sort of relation to the man in that moment to be able to have a one-on-one with him in order to calm him down. That's what I loved and respected so much about Nancy. She was a true role model who looked after every single person that came into her life. I lost touch with her when I eventually moved away, but it's like I said before, I will never forget this night, nor will I ever forget Nancy. Right now, it's just my son, age 7, and myself, as my wife had passed away about 6 months ago. I'm still pretty devastated by it, but I just wanted to say how thankful I am to your Creepy Fox podcast. It has helped me in much more ways than you can possibly imagine, so thank you very much. Speaking on the Creepy Fox podcast, here is a quick creepy story for you that actually just happened to me last week. I had gotten off of work, and I was now going to pick up my son from my mom's house. However, I wanted to cheer him up since I knew he was pretty down that day, so I drove over to McDonald's to get him a Happy Meal. I got into the drive-thru lane, and after I finished my order, I moved up and there are 3 cars ahead of me. I was listening to some classic rock, not really paying attention to my surroundings, and then all of a sudden, I hear a pounding on my right side at the passenger side door. I look, and there's this random guy with blood all over his shirt, holding a large knife and acting like a maniac. It was quite the interesting sight for sure, and it didn't help that he went over to my side of the car, and now he started pounding on the window next to me and telling me to let him in because aliens were after him. Those were his words. I could now get a better look at him and I could hear him better now that I turned down the volume, and poor guy was lost. I felt bad, but then I remember he's holding a large knife and he could potentially try stabbing somebody. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my cell phone and called for the local police. Well, it seems like an eternity I'm on the phone, but he tries pulling at the door handle, and then I hear him say he was going to cut all of my intestines out and then use them as a jump rope. So much for the aliens. Well, clearly the people in front of me were scared because they just drove away, and finally deciding I had enough myself, I did the same thing too. Luckily at this point, as I'm exiting the parking lot, the police were just pulling in. I also didn't pay, so I just went over to a different McDonald's and bought food there. I heard from a friend that works at one of the stores near the McDonald's that the guy was on drugs and the police were able to apprehend him without much issue. Quite a crazy incident, that's for sure. But anyway, that was my story submission. Again, thank you Creepy Fox for everything you do for us. And thank you for giving me hope and inspiration, seeing all that you've been going through. as it's giving me strength not to give up, as you've shown your strength as well. I send you blessings, my friend, and to everyone out there, thank you, and blessings to you as well. I was 23 at the time, and I was living in an apartment complex with my boyfriend in my city's downtown area in 2013. There were plenty of shopping centers around us, which included stores like Marshall's, Best Buy, Target, and your typical fast food places like McDonald's and Panda Express. Anyway, it was about 9 p.m. and I was playing some video games with a couple of my female friends while talking via Xbox Live, and the talk of food had come up. We had decided to stop in one of the safe rooms in the game while my other two friends, Julie and Erica, are warming up some food in their homes respectively. I was going to warm something up to eat, but when I went over to the kitchen to grab some leftovers from the other night, it had somehow gone bad and it spoiled. It was a shame since I was going to be saving it for that night. I'm a night owl, so I normally don't eat during the daytime since I'm usually sleeping. So I came up with my options since my boyfriend had just left to go to work and he couldn't just bring me something to eat at the time. So I just decided the heck with it. I'm going to put on my sneakers and make a quick jog on over to the McDonald's that's in the shopping center across the way from my apartment complex. I asked my friends if they didn't mind waiting for me, and they said it was not a problem. We can just leave the game on and take a break, and then we can continue with the level when I came back. So I grabbed a light sweater, put on said sneakers, and I made my way over to that McDonald's. It was quite busy at the time. Now it's closer to 9:30 p.m. But I had my order placed and ticket in hand as I waited for my meal to be ready. As I was looking down at my phone, I happened to feel a tap on my shoulder. I looked up from my phone to see what was going on, and I now face a random middle-aged man I'd never met before. He apologizes for interrupting me and asks for my name. I just gave him a random made-up one from the top of my head, and then he starts to compliment my eyes and my ginger-colored hair. I awkwardly thanked him for his words, and I continue to look up the screen to check on the status of my order, and then he just randomly asks me, "Are you doing anything later this night?" I told him I had plans, to which he then responds by asking me if I had a boyfriend. I told him I did, and this does seem to get him to back off. However, something, I don't know what it was, perhaps some kind of sixth sense, was telling me not to keep my eyes off of him. I just had these really bad vibes that he was secretly up to something, and he was waiting for me to let my guard down. Anyway, he stepped away from me, heading closer to the cash register since his order was up next, and I sighed a breath of relief since he then walked out of my sight. My order was up 5 minutes later, and now with my meal in hand, I exit the McDonald's and look up ahead toward my apartment complex, ready to have my first meal of the day, and excited to get back to playing some more games. "Hey, wait up for me," I heard at my side, looking to see the same man from inside the McDonald's who was asking me all those random questions as he pulled up to me in his truck, blocking my way. What's up?" I asked him in a nervous tone. "I can give you a ride home. You shouldn't be walking alone at night by yourself. There are a lot of creeps out here." As if this middle-aged man wasn't being a creep himself. "Nah, I'm good. I appreciate the offer though. Please, I insist. It's not a bother at all. I love helping out young women like yourself." I was getting pretty annoyed at this point because I quite literally just live across the street and want to be left alone. So, with a more firm tone, I told him, "Look man, beat it. I already told you I'm not interested in being helped." Big mistake. That guy took that extremely personal, and things got super scary. "What did you say to me?" He then calls me the B word and opens his car as he attempts to step outside to stop me. I got super scared at that point since the tone of his voice, as well as the look in his eyes, made him appear as if he was about to attack me. Luckily, I did see that the light had turned green up just ahead of me, so I said whatever and I start running as I can hear the guy telling me to come back. Unfortunately for me, In my effort to get away from that creep, I ended up tripping on a part of the sidewalk that had been fixed since a recent earthquake that had happened a few months prior, and so I went flying face down to the concrete. I didn't have a drink with me since I was going to be drinking water I had at home, but my bag of food ended up falling down to the floor below. A miracle, though, that it didn't come out of the bag, but that wasn't my main concern right now. Although I was very thankful I hadn't been seriously injured from my trip, I had been followed, because in these moments as I'm recollecting myself and trying to get my senses back, some lights flashed behind me. Ugh, great. The guy from the McDonald's had speed run his way over to me, and now he rolled down his window, and now he's demanding I get inside the car. "You're hurt. Let me take you to the hospital so you can get checked up on." The guy was seriously not giving up, I'll give him that. Now furious more than anything, I flipped him off and told him to get lost, and again I hear him get angry. "What did you say to me?" he says as he pulled his truck up closer to the curb to park, and then he turned his vehicle off in order to come after me yet again. At this point, I didn't care if he would find out I lived here, since where else could I go? I booked it yet again, making sure to be careful of where I was stepping, and I make it toward the apartment entrance, where this guy is still chasing me and saying he was going to teach me a lesson once he got his hands on me. Luckily, he needed a fob key in order to enter this part of the apartment, so I had that advantage for myself, and I quickly get inside since I did have a lead on him. I finally managed to catch my breath as I looked back at him through the glass windows, and I can see his face is completely red. I could actually just make out certain words he was saying, but obviously I couldn't hear them, and he makes a motion as if saying that he wasn't done with me just yet, and this wasn't going to be the last time I would see him. Well, safe to say, I didn't leave my apartment complex alone after that, and about a year later, we moved across the country since my boyfriend had gotten an amazing job opportunity. I never did see that creep again, and I hope I never do, because I have some pepper spray with his name waiting for him, just in case he tries anything funny. This comes from the perspective of a female who at the time was 23 years old. Now, I got to find exactly which episode of the Creepy Fox podcast this was in. Maybe one of you remember which episode I'm referring to exactly, but I know you covered a story from the McDonald's that's on Harbor Boulevard, across the street from Disneyland in Anaheim, California. Well, I too had a scary thing happen to me back in 2019 when I was there at that specific McDonald's. Here's what went down. So a good friend of mine had given me a complimentary ticket for Disneyland as a birthday present, since she rarely goes with her own family anyway and didn't want the ticket to go to waste. Thus, I spent my whole day going on rides, eating snacks like churros, popcorn, and others, and then ending my evening there by watching the fireworks show. Once it was over, I called my dad and I told him to meet me at the McDonald's that's across the street in about an hour or so he could go ahead and pick me up. That gave me plenty of time to go to one of the shops on Main Street so I could go ahead and pick up some candies to take home for my little brother and my parents too. I spent about 15 minutes doing that, and no more than another 15 minutes, I made it to the McDonald's, which if you've ever been to that one, then you know how busy it is all day. I was actually feeling a bit hungry as the last time I had ate was around 2 p.m. So I said, what the heck, I'll order myself a hamburger, fries, and a Sprite to go. I ordered and then got a call from my dad saying that he was going to be running a little bit late since there was quite a bit of traffic, so to just please be patient. It's fine, I told him, since I'm still waiting for my food anyway. Fast forward another 10 minutes, my food is good to go, and I grab it and choose to sit outside on one of the empty tables since it's pretty hectic in there. I'm actually pretty sure that they were all empty because it was freezing outside, and I was the only one crazy enough to sit out there. Regardless, I now proceed to look at all the photos I'd taken earlier to kill some time. Meanwhile, my dad gets there to the McDonald's. No more than 5 minutes after staring at my phone, I feel the table move, and I feel someone get close to me, followed by the smell of really bad BO. I looked away from my screen, and it's this random homeless man that's just staring into my eyes and asking if I had some extra cash I could give him. I told him, sure, why not, and I gave him the last $5 I had on me, hoping that he was going to leave me alone. But instead he throws the $5 in my face, and he says, "What do I look like? Do you think $5 is enough?" This guy's attitude, I'll tell you. I got so mad because I know there are genuine people out there that are homeless that are really nice, and they've fallen on hard times. But to be so inconsiderate that I gave him $5 and he just threw it in my face? I mean, it was all the cash I had on me. Well, at that point, I said I was done being nice. So I grabbed my food and leave the table area in order to walk across the way from me so I could wait on the other side of the McDonald's. The creep follows me there too, and he's starting to grow agitated that I'm ignoring him, and he wants me to give him even more money. I'm reminding him I have no more, and then he starts to hurl insults at me saying how I have enough money to buy myself my own food, but not for him. Not gonna lie, he was starting to grow quite violent. A nice man who had walked out of the McDonald's with his family did overhear all the insults the man was giving me and told the homeless man to get lost or he was going to call the cops. The last thing I remember the jerk saying was something about how I should be ashamed of myself for having others come to my aid and fight my own battles. But the one line that stays cemented in my head was when he told me he was going to stab my eyes out of their sockets and eat them for breakfast. Joking or not, I don't know what he might have been on, since the only logical explanation I could think of was he had to have been on drugs. I'm not too sure myself. Anyway, the guy eventually walked away, and that family kept me company as my dad arrived about 3 minutes later, not having a single clue to the creepy incident I just had to deal with. Now I know this probably is a bit more on the tame side to what you might hear on the Creepy Fox podcast, but it is true when they say McDonald's does bring out quite the collection of human beings. Lots of good, but then lots of bad and straight up weird. I just hope all of you out there don't have to deal with people like this. It's just a shame how you can be having yourself a really good day, only for it to get completely ruined by some random, violent nobody. My girlfriend and I were on a road trip to visit my parents, who lived 10 hours away from us during the week of Thanksgiving in the year 2000. We stopped at a McDonald's along the way as we were getting pretty hungry and we hadn't seen any signs for food in quite some time. This small rest area, which was in bum middle of nowhere Oklahoma, had only said McDonald's and a gas station, which at the time I remember being empty. We went inside the McDonald's and sat in there for about 20 minutes, taking our time as we listened to the music playing and watched the cars driving by on the road in front of us. Something about it was just extremely therapeutic, or maybe it was all the sugar from the soda making us feel really good. Whatever the case, there are a few other customers who are also minding their own business too, and out from seemingly nowhere, this heavy-set man who has a bandana covering up his face walks inside the McDonald's and makes an order. My girlfriend pointed him out, not that I didn't already have some strange feeling about him, and we kinda just kept an eye on him as he takes his seat at the table next to us and strikes up a random conversation. "Hey, how are you two doing? It's a nice evening for a drive, wouldn't you say?" Again, he still has that bandana on his face, and we're both getting these really bad vibes from him because he's looking at my wife more than he should. I just asked him straight up what he was doing and what he wanted, and then he says something that made us both uncomfortable. "I've been traveling across the United States looking for good-looking women like your girlfriend. I work with a talent agency in the adult entertainment business. Would you two be interested?" "Absolutely not," we both said, almost at the same time. And the guy now starts telling us how we can make a lot of money in a short amount of time, and how he has really good connections with higher-ups that he was friends with. We both told him no, and I told him to beat it, and he now goes from cool and collected to straight up furious. "I'm giving you an offer of a lifetime. Be thankful, as this opportunity only comes once." Whatever, buddy. Maybe in your twisted fantasy of thinking, but not for us. We both start to get up and tell him to have a nice night, and can you believe it? The dude follows us outside of the McDonald's. He kept arguing and trying to make up all these random excuses, but it's when we get to our car, when he does something we will never forget. He straight up takes out a huge knife, but then tells us to get out of the car and that he's not finished talking to us. Well, we sure were finished talking to him. I pressed my foot on the gas and we floored it out of there, never looking back as we left him quite literally in the dust. We have never gone back to that McDonald's again, not that we've had any reason to do so. And as a bit of research, I remember after we got back home, I tried to see if perhaps there might have been something in the news of something similar happening to anyone else, but there was nothing. That was why I've come here to the Creepy Fox. I know he's got a lot of people who listen to these scary stories videos, and I also love his narrations too. So I'm sharing this in hopes that maybe there's somebody out there who has more information. Or maybe, just maybe, I know the chances are like finding a needle in a haystack. But perhaps you were one of those people in that McDonald's that day, and you remember a guy in all denim, wearing a bandana to cover his face, harassing a young couple in their mid-20s. I don't know, just thought I would give it a shot. Anyway, that's my scary and creepy McDonald's story. So, I went to LAX to go and pick up my cousin Maria, who was visiting me for a couple of weeks from her hometown in Guadalajara. She was tired because she had stayed up the whole night before, too excited for the flight, but she was also really hungry and hadn't ate in almost 12 hours. I asked her what she wanted and I told her it was on me, and she just said that she wouldn't mind getting something at the McDonald's near my house. She's visited before, so she knows exactly which one. I asked her if she was sure since, there are so many other fast food places. But she said, yeah, that's fine. She'll get something breakfast related. So with the plan set, we spent about an hour driving back to my city and we get to the McDonald's. Of course, the line was super long outside. It was the breakfast rush, I guess. Well, we looked through the windows from our car and we see it's pretty empty in there. Thus, we make the decision to just go in and grab our food since it seems like it's faster that way. We made our order of Egg McMuffins and some hash browns and orange juice, and we sat at one of the tables that's by the soda dispenser as we waited. Nearby, there was a man, I would say he was in his mid-40s, who was reading a newspaper and drinking a coffee. He was friendly and said hello, and we did the same thing back, and he continued with his newspaper reading. Well, a few minutes of waiting and some more customers there to order their food. A man in his early 50s comes over to us and then just straight up says to our face, "In case nobody has told you to already, you're both really sexy. I'd love to go down on one of you, if not, both at the same time." I did my best not to barf right there and then, as my cousin Maria, who speaks and understands perfect English, tells him to screw off. He now raises his voice, grabs Maria's wrist and tells us to stop playing so hard to get, getting closer to sniff her hair. The man who was reading the newspaper tells this creep to get lost and to let go of my cousin, to which he does, and then this causes a frenzy. "Shut up. This is none of your business," the creep said to newspaper guy. "Clearly it is. You're harassing these two young ladies who are trying to go about their day, and then you put your hands on one of them? Shame on you." One thing leads to another, and the 50-year-old creep actually tries to punch the younger guy, but he manhandles him so easily, as we would find out shortly then after that he was actually a Marine who had been deployed in the Middle East in the past, explained his training. Anyway, what makes this story a bit more scary was that there was a cop who had just gotten inside the McDonald's when this was happening, and while we were there watching, the officer asked the creep if he had any weapons on him. He said that he did have a small utility knife on him that he carries in his jacket for work. Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but what if he had used that knife on one of us? Or maybe on nice Marine newspaper guy who saved us? Not to say he might have, as he claimed he wouldn't have used it, but to have gotten so heated in those moments, you just never know. Anyway, the man had grabbed Maria's wrist so hard that it actually bruised a little bit, but Maria, however, just decided not to press any charges, and we moved on with our lives, never encountering that creep again. Hey everyone, so that was the last story for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into it. If this was the first time that Hey everyone, a disclaimer for the following story. It was 2002. I was fresh out of high school with no real clear path on what I wanted to do for the future. Most of my friends went on to college, and some even studied out of country, but I was that one guy that just had enough of studies. My dad told me, it's either you're going to go to college by force, or you're going to find a job by force and pay rent. Well, I really didn't want to study and do more schooling, so I found myself working at my local Walmart, as now my dad would be charging me for rent, like I mentioned just right now. But yeah, he was pretty old-fashioned. Yeah, I got in it from my grandfather who served in World War II. Now, I know some people might think that the way he treated me once I turned 18 was kinda brutal, but it did help shape me up to become a responsible adult that didn't take any BS from anyone who tried to take advantage of me or my family. Anyway, back to the story. I ended up first by being the one who was pushing carts around in the parking lot, which, let me just tell you, is both boring and brutal, especially where I worked in the summertime, this taking place in Texas. Now, I did make sure to drink plenty of water and wore my hat and long sleeves to protect my skin, and over time, I started to get better and better at it. About a month into the job, I was working the night shift, and a couple of my co-workers and I told ourselves that we were going to get some food at one of the fast food joints after we all clocked off of our shift. It sounded like a great plan, so we did all we could to try and make the time go by as fast as we could, and once it was time, we exit the building and we start heading over to our cars. This is only to encounter quite an interesting sight. There is a guy in nothing but his underwear and some tennis shoes running around the parking lot, screaming like a lunatic with a baseball bat of all things. My friends and I looked at each other and joked like the dumb teenagers we were, and I remember we said something along the lines of, "Man, I want what he's having." Well, we didn't realize in that moment just how serious of a situation we were about to find ourselves in. You see, while we laughed and joked about it in that moment, he started to target the cars and began smashing the windows and hoods of said cars. My friend went furious when he smashed his, and he now yelled at him, telling him to knock it off and that he was going to call the cops. Well, he had poked the wasp nest, so to speak, because if he wasn't paying attention to any humans before, he was now. Crazy dude literally started a mad dash toward all of us who were standing there near the entrance of the Walmart like, what do we do now? Yeah, no kidding. We had to run, but we had a good 15 or so second head start of a distance between us. I was too scared to stay out there, so I go inside the store with my other co-workers, as eventually they too joined me, and we dialed for the police. Thump. Thump. Bad word here, bad word there. The crazy man demanded that we open the back door to the Walmart. Of course, it was locked, and the guy even smashes the small window on the door. Now he starts to say he was going to bludgeon us to death. We're all clearly freaking out as he starts making a bunch of strange sounds. They sounded unhuman-like, if that makes any sort of sense. I'm sure it doesn't. It was one of those things you would understand better if you were there with us. But basically, we're thinking to ourselves, where are the cops? Well, the guy did actually stop his tirade against us, but now we peek through the opening in the small window as he goes back into the parking lot and starts smashing more cars again while there's other people watching. Now, let me just go ahead and give a warning here, because what I'm about to describe is quite disturbing. Disturbing in the sense that it contains some very graphic details. Basically, we saw as the man started a chase after a family of four, a mom, a dad, and their two young kids. We could hear the crazy guy saying that he was going to kill them for laughing at him, and the dad reached into a hidden holster underneath his shirt, and in self-defense, myself and one of my other co-workers, since the others had gone out to the front to get a better view, saw through the window opening as the man with the bat was shot dead. I still remember it was a total of 2 gunshots being fired, with one of the gunshots hitting the guy straight on in the temple. My friend and I now looked away as we began to see blood oozing out of him as we went over to a manager as we held back tears, trying to fight off the emotions of what we had just witnessed. I mean, it's not every day you see somebody get shot like that, especially get shot dead. Anyway, it was a whole entire scene, and we had to give statements and talk to the police, and I got counseling for a while after that, since I kept seeing the image of the guy getting shot in the head for weeks, and even months after that, in my dreams. I would eventually recover and move on from the incident, but to say it didn't affect me would be a huge understatement. Oh yes, and before I forget to mention it, I would overhear later on that the dad who protected his family was not charged for anything at all. Not that he should have been anyway, since, he was protecting them from a man who said out loud he was going to kill them and then ran after them with a metal baseball bat. Also, I would actually eventually go to college, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I also did some extra schooling after that, and since late 2010, I'm a physical therapy trainer who helps people recovering from surgeries as well as injuries. Older listener here, I want to share one of my scary experiences from back when I used to work at Walmart in the early 90s as a sales associate. I was primarily scheduled at nighttime since during the daytime I was taking a few classes as I was trying to get an associate's degree at my local community college. Well anyway, one night when I clocked in, things are relatively slow. Foot traffic is at a minimum, and I'm basically walking around the aisles trying to keep myself awake to the best of my ability. At about 10:15 p.m., I was on my final break and I went outside to have myself a quick cigarette. Some random customer came up to me while I was out there and he asked if I had a lighter on me, to which I said yes, and then I lit his cigarette. We chit-chatted about the weather for a few minutes like a couple of long-lost pals, and when we noticed this man was appearing to just be talking to himself in the parking lot, we thought out loud, well, that sure is kinda weird. I did mention this was back in the 90s, right? Cell phones weren't really a thing, and AirPods definitely weren't either. So anyway, we kept an eye on him as he soon walks closer to the Walmart and then disappears once he steps through the front doors. Guess you'll have to deal with him, am I right? The guy I just met I remember jokingly saying to me as I tell him I need to get back to work. He says that he was here to get some diapers for his grandson, and he thanked me for the quick chat. Before going on his way, however, he said, "Remember kid, chase your dreams, and if you fail, get back up and try again. Never give up." With that, we were both on our way. Now, as soon as I walk through the front doors of the Walmart, things just go from bad to worse. The guy who walked in there starts screaming and shouting at everyone in the Walmart, talking about how he was going to kill everyone there, that he was going to make the devil really happy, things like that. This was a pretty sketchy Walmart either way, so it didn't faze me as much as I walked past him and over to some co-workers. By the way, this is all taking place in less than a minute. When I took one last look at him, I saw he now had a revolver in his hand. He shot a couple of rounds into the ceiling, and then one at eye level too. That was followed by pure agonizing screams of terror and fear. Now, if it wasn't for what happened next, I think chances are this guy could have potentially gone on a killing spree. Remember the man from earlier in my story? The one who came over and asked for a cigarette and was here for the diapers? The balls of steel on this guy. While the crazy gunman had his back turned toward the entrance, that nice guy from outside literally pulled a Goldberg and speared the guy with a tackle to the floor, knocking the revolver out of the man's grasp. Mr. Balls of Steel, or I guess in this case, let's just call him Duke Nukem, as that's where I'm getting that reference from, then shouts and says, "Quick, somebody grab the gun." A couple of hefty men ran over as they secured the weapon and helped to subdue the crazed man. But of course, what about the bullets? Had somebody been struck? Well, indeed, someone had. A woman had been hit in the arm, and she was bleeding really badly. A first aid kit was brought over, while myself and some other good people helped to control the blood loss, as 911 was dialed to get cops and paramedics out to the area. The woman would be taken to the hospital, and the cops ended up taking the crazy guy away, but not without quite a bit of a struggle. Needless to say, we considered that Duke Nukem guy, yeah, we're still calling him that, a hero, and the cops praised him and everybody